So welcome to our swim webinar for Swim Month. Obviously, as triathletes, we are swimmers, and the swim can be a little bit of an enigma, a confusing thing for triathletes, and many of us are adult learned swimmers, so we're trying to learn this complicated, technique-intensive discipline as adults, and we have to focus and we have to approach it deliberately. So today, we can just hop right into it. I sent over a PDF that has the outline. I'll send that over right now in the chat. That's the link to it right there, so you can kind of follow along. But basically, we're just going to have a brief overview of good swim technique. We'll go over the phases, and we'll talk about some issues that we've seen recently in doing form analysis for athletes, and issues that we've seen over the years also. And we'll talk about other aspects of technique. We definitely want to talk about core connection and kind of coupling that core power with your pull. That is huge. And a lot of triathletes, they don't activate their lats, and they don't, harness core rotational power to drive their pull, etc. We'll talk a little bit about drills, how to use them, how to integrate them. And we'll also go over some questions that athletes have brought up. So number one, I guess we can get started and just talk about the stroke phases. And I'm not gonna share my screen yet because I'm gonna be making movements, but just to go over basically the 5 phases. You have the entry, which is when your hand enters the water, and in general you want to enter fingertips first. And one thing that a lot of triathletes do is they enter really passively. And good swimmers, and especially in open water, you don't want to gently press your hand on top of the water. You want to get it in there, you want to reach out, because entry is part of that coupling motion. So enter assertively. So you're going to enter in front of your head. A common error is to enter close to your head. You don't want to do that. You kind of want to enter around, if you were to hold your hand out, basically in between the elbow and the wrist, so somewhere in there. And then you want to basically reach straight out, and as you enter, you're rotating, and your fingertips, since you're rotating, if they're straight out, they're going to kind of be near armpit level. And you need to be in line with your shoulder. So a big error we see, probably the most common, is crossover. And the crossover happens just because athletes, they're not paying attention, they're entering and they're just crossing over naturally, or they're over rotating. This is a big one, and it contributes to a lot. It throws the entire stroke off. So you don't want to over rotate, and you want to make sure you enter in line with your shoulder and reach out. And then we have the catch position, which is really important. The catch position is basically when we keep our elbow more or less, high, and then the hand and forearm drop. You sort of anchor it, you grip that water, and then you pull back. And when I share my screen, I'll show you some good examples of this. And then we have the pull phase. So after you enter and then catch that water, you're sort of rotating back towards the pulling side, and you want to focus on pulling basically straight back. You might have heard, make an S, but that isn't really taught anymore. Although, because you're rotating, it is sort of the case that you'll sort of make an S, but don't try to do that. So you enter, catch, and then pull. And we want to add sort of a subset phase to the pull, and that's the press. Because a lot of triathletes, they don't finish their stroke. They'll come to their belly button and they'll pull their hand out of the water, and you're missing out on some propulsion, and also you're also just kind of throwing off your stroke by exiting too early. It's too rushed. So you want to enter, catch, pull, and then basically press. Think about pressing a little bit. You're going to use your tricep a little bit, but when we're pulling, we're rotating and we're tapping into the lat. And that rotation is important because it enables us to tap into the lat. And then we want to exit back here near the hip. That's pretty straightforward. And then the last thing that we want to talk about is the recovery. And that's lifting your hand out of the water and then entering again. And we can go into a little bit more detail in that, in the recovery phase, because, you know, there's the classic high elbow, which you often see in pool swimmers. And then in open water, a lot of times, you know, you see more of a straight arm recovery. You see that in Lucy Charles and others, a lot of great open water swimmers. But let me share my screen here, and I can show you some examples, good examples of what I'm talking about. So here is, y'all can see my screen now.
Yep.
But cool. So firstly, let's talk about entry. And you know, there's a difference. Like if you were to look at a total immersion, does anybody know what total immersion is? It's basically like an approach to learning how to swim, and it's a really hip driven stroke, and it looks really pretty, but nobody really swims like it in open water. And you know, I just wanted to show some replay of the 10K swim at the Olympics. You know, you can kind of see this guy right here. I mean, he is not gently entering. Look at his left arm. It's basically perfectly straight. He's smacking that water because you want to keep that momentum going. And in open water, that's really important because there's chop. So you're not going to have the luxury of having this nice pull stroke. You just have to, especially in a wetsuit, you just need to get your hand from the exit point to the front. And don't worry about it looking pretty or anything like that. In open water, the key is maintaining momentum, cutting through that chop as efficiently as possible. And you want to be assertive with your stroke and with that entry. But errors that we see with entry is basically athletes either entering elbow first. You don't want to do that. You basically want to enter fingertips first, and reach out, straight out in line with your shoulder, like position 11. And then after the, does anybody have any coach or anybody have anything about entry that they want to talk about?
Yeah, one thing I'll say too is a lot of times new swimmers think that the hand needs to be at the surface of the water, and that's not necessarily the case. Depending on how fast you're moving, that hand might be a little bit further down in the water as well. So if you're moving pretty fast, it's probably going to be a little bit higher up. But if you're going a little bit slower or during like a warm up, to balance out your body position, that hand when you enter the water might be a little bit lower.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of times if athletes think they need to reach out sort of shallowly, what ends up happening is their hand is above their elbow when they're reaching out, and then their palm moves up and it creates a little bit of drag. So that's not good. And it is the case that it's a good point. You know, when you enter and reach, having your arm out ahead, it actually counterbalances your legs. So that enables your body position to be better. Your hips will sit higher in the water. It'll sort of counteract your legs a little bit, and cause them not to drop as much. But yeah, so you could see they just throw their hand forward. And you know, we can also look at Lucy Charles. She has a good open water style stroke, and including entry. You sort of look her, she just throws her hand up. She isn't gently placing it in. She's getting that forward, reaching out. See, she's reaching out right here as she's rotating. So there's that coupling motion. You're sort of entering, and you have momentum from entering, and that's sort of helping to drive the rotation. And as you're rotating, you're pulling with the other arm, and you're mainly using your lats. So you're coupling that core rotational movement with the pull. And you know, you can kind of see her doing that well. And her arm recovery is really straight, as you could see. And that's a good open water swim stroke. She's arguably the best. Well, she is the best swimmer in triathlon, definitely the best female swimmer. Josh Amberger, I think, I mean, Lucy is faster than almost everybody, including the men. So she's top notch. And so moving on from the entry phase, we have the catch phase. And Derek, I don't know if Derek Wolf is still on, but Derek, he sent over some footage of him swimming. So he brought his GoPro to the pool and took the footage himself. And he did a good job, you know, having a front view, sort of a side view, an overhead view. And the main issue that we saw is that, so when you enter, you want your hand and forearm to drop into the catch position. And to do that, you know, a common cue is to reach over a barrel. And we like to use the physio ball, like reach over physio ball cue. And, you know, you all should be able to see that. But basically, all we're trying to get at with this is you keep your elbow high, and then you grab the water with your hand and forearm like this. You get it vertical before, or mostly vertical, before you start pooling, because that's a paddle. Your hand and forearm is basically a paddle. I know that some people don't like what I call it, a paddle or a paddle blade, because people have different ideas of what a paddle blade is, but it's that's essentially what you're doing. You're basically anchoring your hand and forearm like that. And you can kind of see it here also. You know, she's reaching out in line with her shoulder right here. Fingertips are, you know, call it 8 inches or so, 12 inches below the surface. And then, you know, her elbow remains high. You know, she's rotating, so it's not like her elbow is necessarily dropping here. And her hand and forearm is grabbing that water. It's reaching over the physio ball, and her elbow is high. And this is huge. This is the most important thing that you need to learn. If we're going to distill it down to one thing, it's setting up your catch correctly so you can pull well. And if you're going to focus on one thing, you had to focus on only one thing for a month, this is a good one. So you want to reach out and be patient, grab clear water like we talked about in the weekly nugget, and then you want to anchor that hand and forearm. And you can kind of see Derek, he sent over some video for us to look at. And you can kind of see here, and you know, he's doing a lot of things correctly, but you know, we want to talk about the things that he's doing wrong so that he can improve them. You can kind of see here, you know, that he's with the left arm, you know, when he reaches out, see his elbow is dropping. Like at this point, you know, he's starting to pull. His elbow is already almost in line with his shoulder. Like his elbow should be up here, and his hand should be down here. So it should look more like this at this point. So his elbow should be higher, and his hand and forearm should be anchored in the water so he can grip that water and rip it. And this was the main issue that, you know, we saw with him. His coach, Derek Owens, identified it. And, you know, he's missing out on so much propulsion on that left side. I mean, his distance per stroke can increase dramatically. You know, he's doing it a little bit better on the right, but there's still room to improve. You know, it's worth being a little bit patient out front, especially when you're just learning and developing technique. Find that clear water, anchor, and then pull. You don't want your elbow to slip through the water, because you're not going to propel yourself through the water well. Anybody have anything on the catch? Any coach or athlete? We have a lot of great swimmers on this team. So if anybody wants to hop in and offer anything, feel free. One other aside that I noticed is you know, Derek, we don't have a section on kicking, but you know, it does look, he bends his knees a lot when he kicks, a little bit too much. You can't really, you know, you want to kick from the hip. He's kicking from the knee a little bit. You know, it's not terrible. I've seen way worse, but you know, there's definitely room to improve. And let's see. you know, see that hand, see his elbow is dropping, his elbow, he's over rotating to the left right now. And he's probably crossing over on that right side. Yeah, he's crossing over on that right side. He's pulling too early. So he's over rotating to the left too much. It's throwing off his balance. And we'll talk about rotation in a little bit, but yeah, a lot to improve upon when it comes to connecting that pool with his rotation.
Hey, Conrad,
Yep.
if you're trying to practice this, besides just using paddles, is there a specific drill you've got that you can really, I don't know, focus on it to make sure if you don't record yourself, like to hit on?
Yeah, single arm freestyle is the best for this specifically because, you just hold, I mean, one hand is out front and all you're thinking about is, reaching out, anchoring, and then pulling. And then you're reaching out, anchoring, and pulling. And you can do it with fins. Most triathletes should do basically every drill with fins because it just enhances, propulsion in the water. And for a lot of drills, you want or need a propulsive kick. So I would say that that's a good drill for practicing, getting into that catch position. The other thing you could do, it's called, it's the YMCA drill. So if you want to learn how to, basically the different phases like, reach, catch, pull, you basically kick with fins and both hands out like this in position 11. So your arms are in line with your shoulders, and then it kind of embeds that position. Because again, like I said earlier, when a lot of athletes, when they enter, they cross over center, just swimming like this, and you can even skull a little bit. You sort of learn what that position feels like. And then you can kick, but you put your hands, you drop your arm and hand into the catch position. And then you feel that, and you can kind of skull a little bit, but you get used to feeling where your elbow is. If your elbow drops a lot, doing position 11 and then sculling in the catch position when you're kicking is helpful. And then, you could do it a little bit farther down also. So single arm freestyle, and then basically kicking with fins and sculling in the catch position, I think are helpful for developing a good catch.
Another one I'd say too is like the fist drill, because it forces you to feel the water with your forearm. That way you're getting an elbow high, and you don't have that hand as a paddle to pull the water. So you really are trying to engage like the forearm to pull that water back.
Yeah, that's a really good one. So, the purpose of the catch is to set you up for a great pull. And, the pull, the idea is to obviously propel yourself through the water. And what we really want to stress right now is harnessing core rotational power and sort of that core connection. So, we'll combine, bullet 3 pull with 2, the core connection, because if you think about it, if you swim flat in the water, if you don't rotate at all, you're only using your shoulders. So you're basically kind of using your belts. You're not really using your lats, which are way stronger than your shoulder muscles. So you want to rotate, and we want to be careful when we're talking about rotation, because as we just saw, here, Derek is over rotating to the left when he's breathing and pulling, and that's causing a lot of instability, and it's throwing off the rhythm of his stroke. So if he was actually rotating less to the left side, he'd be set up better to initiate a propulsive pull on the right, because he's basically 90 degrees rotated here. So it's going to take him a long time to rotate to the other side. You only need to rotate about 45 degrees to each side. Rotation is, everybody's always told to rotate when they're learning how to swim, which is true. But a lot of athletes end up over rotating. As long as your shoulder's clearing the water, you're more or less fine. Let's look at Katie Ledecky, you know, the best swimmer ever. And I'll show you just sort of, it'll give you a good sort of glimpse of, now she sort of gallops with her stroke, but, you know, it'd be interesting to see how, you know, she's rotating here. So you can kind of see, look at that, like Barrett, not that much, about 45 degrees here and less than 45 to the other side. Like she isn't rotating 90 degrees or anything like that. We can also look at this guy, you know, he's a doper, but you can't deny that he has a really good stroke. So look at him like rotating. So again, it looks like he's rotating a little bit more to the right than he actually is. But if you look at the left, you know, he's probably only rotating 30 degrees or so. So it's not like they're rotating or swimming entirely on their side. So it's almost like you want to rock back and forth instead of just focus on rotating to your side. It's like, because you want to tap into your lats. And this is a good photo that will sort of demonstrate that if it's, so right here, see this photo right here? You can kind of see how the woman on the left is over rotating. It is causing some instability and she's crossing over here. But, you know, this woman is rotating a little bit less and it's just, but she's still rotating. And you can kind of see that this is going to be way more propulsive than here. And there's just more stability. Like you don't need to rotate 90 degrees, you know, 30 to 45 degrees is plenty. Hold on, I have something playing through my ears and it's really annoying. Okay, there we go. So now let's loop back to, yeah, so here's what happens when you over rotate. You cross over and there's just no stability. You can't easily, so you're not gonna get any propulsion on this side. And, you know, Derek Wolf was over rotating definitely to the left. And he basically was in this position more or less. You know, now you basically want to be in between. Well, this is better right here. You know, she's rotated about 45 degrees here. So when she's pulling, she can harness her core rotation to pull with that left arm. But if you're over here and you start pulling like this, you're not really going to leverage your lats or tap into that core. You kind of have to be here. Does that make sense? So that you're stable. So, I mean, not to overcomplicate it, but rotate about 45 degrees, not 90. And if you do that, you can tap into your lats. I don't know, I bring up this photo a lot. Like if you were to pull yourself up out of the pool or pull yourself up onto a box, you know, where would your hands be? They'd be right here. Like your lats are most powerful in this position. Like you're not gonna, you know, you're not gonna go to the end of the pool with your arms out here and try to lift yourself up. There's no power there. You're gonna kind of go like this and push yourself up, which is exactly what you want to do when you're swimming. You know, you're anchoring that arm and then you're basically kind of pulling yourself and pressing yourself out of a pool. So it's like a pull and press. Anybody have any questions about the pool or tidbits to offer?
The one thing I'll say is when you start engaging the lats, you notice it right away. So like you almost want to, once you feel it, then you know you're pulling correctly because the lats you'll feel the stretch a little bit and you'll feel it engage as you pull through. And a lot of times if you're noticing your shoulders are really sore and things like that, you're probably more shoulder dominant and you want to correct it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of shoulder issues result from over rotating to one side and then not rotating enough to the other, because then there's like impingement when you're lifting it. And then you have a shoulder driven stroke on one side, basically. And so the difference between a hip driven stroke and a shoulder driven stroke is basically cadence based. You see a lot of sprinters. It's not super sustainable over distance unless you're fit and your stroke rate isn't super. A hybrid stroke is probably more common to see. But if you're swimming flat in the water and you're going like this, it's shoulder driven. But this is more hip driven. You're reaching out, you're streamlined, you're not necessarily gliding that much, but you are gliding a little bit, let's be real. And then you're rotating well to each side. You're not rotating 90 degrees and getting all off kilter. You're rotating 45, but you're harnessing that core when you're pulling. You're coupling power. That's the big thing. There are 3 coupling actions happening. When you enter, that's actually driving rotation a little bit, and there's kinetic energy there. And then you're rotating. So that's also, so you're coupling power from here into the rotation, and then that rotation into the pull, and you're activating your lats. That's what you want to focus on when you're swimming, and you want to feel that. And this month we talked about slowing down your stroke and trying to connect that core into your stroke. If you didn't, go read the weekly nugget emails. We went into it into good detail, but it's worth slowing down your stroke, feeling that, and just learning the appropriate technique for a hip-driven stroke. You need to know how to do it. That is not to say that that's the ideal stroke for you, like this catch-up, slow, hip-driven style stroke, but you need to know what it feels like to use your lats, because you're gonna have a more powerful stroke for sure. And then one other thing we want to talk about, sort of as it relates to this core connection, we'll just finish this section, is kick timing, because your kick will drive some of the rotation too. One error we see with a lot of athletes is they don't know how to kick right, or they don't know how to time their kick with the rest of their stroke. And the best way to think about kick timing is how your kick is going to drive that rotation. We know that the point of rotating is to pull more powerfully, or it's okay to think about it like that in this context. The purpose of rotating is to pull better, basically. Just think of it like that. And then you can think of the kick. The kick has a bunch of benefits. It'll lift the legs a little bit and add a little bit of propulsion if you can have ankle flexibility, and it'll help, with the timing and rhythm of your stroke and all that. But a good way that I think triathletes need to think about it is it also contributes to rotation. So if I'm rotating to the left side, when I kick down on the left side, my hip is going to rotate up. So that's going to drive the rotation. So, right when you enter the catch phase, that's, you want to be rotating this way. So, a cue is basically you kick and you drive rotation as you're pulling on that side. So 2 things are happening. You're kicking, which is driving your hip rotation, and you're pulling. You're also entering on this side. So there are 2 ways to think about the timing of it. Like, so on the left side, if I want to kick on the left side, my right hand is going to enter, and then I'm going to kick on the left at the same side, and I'm going to pull. So you can feel that surge when you time your kick well with your rotation. And I wanted to use Katie Ledecky. She has a great 2-beat kick, but I think I have to go back. Here it is. So look at her left foot here. See how she's kicking down, it's driving rotation, and she's pulling. That's what you want to feel. And so this is famous. This is the middle of her 800-meter record. She had a 1-beat kick for the middle portion of this, and she was going so much faster than everybody. But you can see how this kick, you can understand more about how your kick drives rotation and that rotation should be coupled with your pull to generate a more powerful propulsive pull. So this is a cool video. One of my favorites, because this is also achievable for a lot of triathletes. You know, it isn't like she doesn't have a crazy stroke. She has a little bit of a gallop in her stroke, but it's not like I don't know, like an Ian Thorpe stroke where his kick is so powerful that he can take 10 strokes per minute and swim like, 45 seconds per 100 or something. It's, she has like a reasonable cadence, and a lot of triathletes don't have a propulsive kick. So them doing a 6-beat kick or even a 4-beat kick isn't massively beneficial. So, study this video for understanding how your kick drives rotation and increases the power of your pull. Anybody have any other questions on core connection or the pull? Or anything to add?
On the kicking part, could you go into a little bit about like race specifics for kicking? I was listening to the TTL podcast, and they were talking about like you should kick really, really hard, like right before you get out of the water, or like do you not kick a lot and then you kick a little, or like what are your thoughts on kicking just in general to get the legs going to get into like transition?
I think that it's a good idea to kick a little bit more towards the end, so that, I mean, all the blood is in your arms and in your upper body when you're swimming. And when you get up in transition, it's jarring. Now, no matter what, it's going to be jarring. You can kick well towards the end. Going from horizontal to vertical is completely different. Is the benefit is probably marginal to increase your kick, just like you hear, at the end of the bike, increase your cadence a little bit, just to start mimicking run turnover more. And it's good to do that, if only for the mental, it sort of bolsters you mentally, and then you sort of prepare for the transition. No matter what, the transition is going to be terrible. You're going to be dizzy. You're going to feel disoriented. And you just have to fight through it. Nobody feels good in transition, but I definitely think that it's worth kicking a little bit more at the end. You don't want to exhaust yourself though either. So it's a fine balance. Launching into a 6-beat kick at the end and generating a bunch of lactate and going into the red is not smart. Don't do that. If you're going to do that, just keep your kick cadence that you use throughout the whole rest of the race. But yeah, as long as you can ration your effort and kick a little bit more, I think it's worth it. There are a lot of you'll hear a lot of conflicting things as it relates to kicking during triathlons. And I think it kind of depends on it depends on a few things. So number one, you are a long distance open water swimmer if you're a triathlete, and the kick is will offer less propulsive benefit because of that than if you were like a sprinter or a normal pool swimmer. And we can even see with Katie Ledecky, she's swimming the 800-meter world record here. She's flying and she's not kicking that much. Now, she has great timing. Her legs are up near the surface, so you don't want your legs to drag, but a 2-beat kick can work for a lot of athletes, especially if you're wearing a wetsuit. I would say that most athletes, assuming you have a decently propulsive kick, for most of the race, you'll probably have a 4-beat kick or a 3-4-beat kick type hybrid kick. But we see a lot of effective 2-beat kicks in open water. But it really depends on the swimmer. Is Alex on here? Alex Leandri?
I'm here.
Okay. Did you want to talk about that kick study that you learned? If not, I can. I don't know if you're.
Yes.
You're on that's what I was wondering. Okay.
You're good. Jenna's here too.
What's up?
So I listened to a speaker talk one of the USAT level 3 coaches. I think stop biking. And she did this cool analysis on like how to kick and whether you like literally like to kick or not to kick. And the whole premise was, are you faster with a pull buoy or not with a pull buoy? Like, it's not like triathletes don't need to kick to save their legs. It's what are you faster at and what are you better at? So for myself, growing up swimming, like I need that kick. It helps me balance and rotate and all the things that you had mentioned earlier. But I know a lot of people who fly past me when I'm at practice who have a pull buoy in. And they're just because they are able to like elevate themselves, or their kick like literally slows them down. Like I know Conrad, you have ankle mobility issues sometimes,
Yep.
and like foot doesn't want to like bend backwards, right? So if you have that issue, and your kick is literally like slowing you down, then it's not worth kicking. So it's all about who you are as a swimmer. It's not just like a one cold cut answer. And I found that pretty interesting because it makes a lot of sense, right? Because some people with swimming backgrounds kick and some people don't, like Katie Ledecky. But then you have other people that can kick the whole triathlon and be fine. So
Yeah.
I would challenge everybody to next time they're in the pool, just do like a couple 50s or 100s with a pool buoy and without a pool buoy, just to see what you feel more balanced in and what's literally faster. And then that can kind of be your answer for how you should attack races.
Yep. So, you know, that it's an interesting way to think about the kick, because a lot of times the knee-jerk reaction is to, you know, have athletes kick a lot because, you know, swimmers, pure swimmers, they do a lot of kick sets, and because kicking is important. But if you're an adult and you're like hard and soft tissue, like it's really difficult to enhance ankle flexibility oftentimes to have a generated propulsive kick. And then if you try to kick a lot during a race, it's just counterproductive. You know, this isn't to say you shouldn't kick a lot in training or try to achieve ankle flexibility, but you have to be objective and look at what your limitations are and then race to those. You know, training is one thing, but you know, you want to kind of know if you can't kick well, you want to know why you can't kick well. More likely than not, there are probably two reasons. Either you're bending your knee too much, you're not like creating a whip with your legs and feet, like you're trying to kick off your socks. You're not kicking from the hip, or you just can't point your toes. And if you can't point your toes, you're not going to move forward in the water at all. And you're going to generate a lot of drag and your hips are going to ride lower. And there's nothing you could do about it if you can't point your toes. There just isn't. So if you, a lot of times I recommend for much of the warm up, if you have ankle issues, to use fins. You know, personally, I don't start a workout, a main set, until I kick at least 600 yards or swim 600 yards with fins, just because it opens up my ankles a lot. Like I could literally swim 5 seconds per 100 faster after I achieve like an inch of additional ankle flexibility. And that's real. So, you know, test it out and think about kick timing and experiment with a 2-beat kick too. Because even if you don't use the 2-beat kick, it will allow you to understand how that kick drives core rotation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because if you go to the pool and you figure out if you're faster or slower with the pool buoy or without a pool buoy, if your feet are holding you back, like you don't get a pool buoy in a race, even if you have a wetsuit on, like, you have to fix it. So it's like, here's a tool, here's this piece of knowledge that you need to know, and now you need to do something with it. So yeah, that's a great point.
Yep. Exactly. So good stuff. Good stuff to ponder. So that's the core rotation and pull. And you know, the next phase is the exit. You know, don't overthink this one. It's lifting your hand out of the water, but you want to do it down by your hip. You don't want to exit near your belly button. You don't want to hyperextend your elbow, but just before your elbow basically straightens fully, you know, you want to exit. Ideally, when you, go ahead.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just had a question on that because I just listened to the podcast from this morning and Derek was talking about how he's like an exponentially faster swimmer in the open water because you can move your arms so fast. Do you change your exit? Like, do you notice that you like don't rotate as much or you like pull it out faster?
I don't know if I'm changing it from the pool to out to open water specifically. Are you asking about my stroke from open? Yeah, I mean, I know my cadence definitely changes from when I'm in the pool to open water, but I don't know if it's exiting at a different point. If that's what you're asking, I'm pretty sure it's still. I'm just trying to move through the water as fast as possible.
So
It's like,
yeah,
if it's
no, that's a
fast.
good question.
Yeah.
And I think so the most propulsive part of your stroke is, probably from the top of the head down to your belly button. So you're not generating a whole lot of propulsion when you are finishing your stroke, like the press phase. But so, like I said, you don't want to exit with your elbow fully extended. You want a slight bend in it. And there is an argument, a lot of shoulder driven, stroke aficionados, they will say that you can exit near your waist or something. You don't have to really finish it because that will enhance the speed of your stroke. But when it comes to rhythm and timing, that press phase is I think worth 99% of triathletes should probably focus on it. Let's look at somebody else. He is Gregorio Paltrinieri, one of the best distance swimmers of all time. He's still around. He's the top. I mean, certainly top 3 distance swimmers. I think, did he win the 1500 last year at Worlds? But you kind of see, this is interesting because he has a super high stroke rate. He has he's a shoulder driven stroke on one side for sure, but look at how much faster he is. So he's like Derek Stone. He's just taking like 10 more strokes per minute than everybody. And this is a pretty common sort of like open water looking stroke, but I wanted to see where he's finishing. So he's finishing closer to his hip. But as a rule, you want to finish, I think, by your waist or hip. You don't want to shorten your stroke to increase the cadence without experimentation, etc. The larger benefit is to increase your stroke, like distance per stroke, when you're training for most of the year. When you're in open water, though, I mean, it's okay to experiment a little bit. Your stroke will change in open water. It should change a little bit because you're going to have to be sighting. You're going to be throwing your arm over. You're not going to have, a glassy pool, just body of water to swim in. You have to fight a little bit more. And part of that might be not finishing your stroke as far down, near your hip as you otherwise would. But you want to be careful there. That's a good question. I get so. What was the answer there? It was more of just like,
I don't know yet. Yeah,
it depends.
I guess I'm gonna find out when I get in open water again soon.
We'll find out. We'll test it this weekend.
I actually will not be in open water this weekend.
What?
And then so exit. I mean, in an ideal world, when you exit, you kind of turn your hand, so you slice out of the water. You don't press yourself out of the water, but don't waste your time focusing on that. So recovery, like we talked about earlier, there is a pretty consistent difference between the top open water swimmers and the top just pool swimmers. Again, that classic high elbow is, I mean, you still see it in open water among great open water swimmers, but there is a little bit more of a high and wide and straight arm propensity. So this is a pretty common open water stroke, and it's fine. It isn't pretty, but you can kind of see this person is exiting. He's recovering wide, basically wider and higher with the hand. You know, like the fingertip drag drill in the pool is not as relevant for open water. That's a drill that you don't need to do, I would argue, if you're specifically to get ready for open water swimming. It's just the value of that drill is probably less than there are other drills to focus on. But you can kind of see that high and wide recovery. We also see it in Lucy Charles' stroke. Let's see. So look at her, that high and wide. This is the best swimmer in triathlon. She has a very open water stroke. And what happened is, you know, she when she started swimming triathlon, she actually changed her stroke to look more like this because it was faster in open water. So it made sense. So she had a little bit more of a traditional pool stroke. And then she right now, like Derek, her stroke rate is really high. She is not focusing on that classic high elbow. It's get your hand out of the water and get it in front over those waves, you know, high hand and assertively throw that hand forward. But you still want to do it efficiently. You don't want to like tighten up your back muscles and cause a lot of tension. You could throw it up, you know, and it doesn't use a whole lot of energy. You can go from exit to entry pretty efficiently with a straighter arm. But you know, don't force a straight arm either. It's just the point of all this is that there are many ways to swim fast, basically. I mean, if you compare Gregorio Paltrinieri, who has one of the worst, in a textbook, this is one of the worst strokes I've ever seen. You know, the right, you can see how the right arm is very shoulder driven, you know, so he's not reaching. It's just like entering and then he's pulling. So he has a gallop. And then look at his lower body. You know, he's kicking and his kick is driving rotation, but look at that crossover with his feet. It's insane. But it works for him. But his fundamentals are all still there. So that entry, he's still reaching out in line with the shoulder. He's getting a good catch. And he's pulling incredibly propulsively. His core is connected as he's swimming. His body line is long and taut. His kick, his driving rotation, all of the basic principles. He's adhering to those. Does anybody have any questions on any phases of the stroke? If not, let's quickly cover some, I guess, the philosophy of drill work. So drills are, you know, I would say that in many instances they're overrated. If you're going to be doing drills, there needs to be a reason. And you need to alternate them with swimming because you need to apply whatever feel you're going for or correction you're going for in the drill with swimming. An example of this is, so Katie O'Connell sent over a video. So Katie, she has struggled with not crossing over. So when she enters, she had a propensity to cross over. And part of it is due to over rotating and just natural crossover. But so here, what she's doing is she's actually doing a doggy paddle. And then halfway across the pool, she is then swimming because the doggy paddle, what she's doing is she's making sure that she's reaching out in line with her shoulder, that, you know, position 11. You don't want to swim like this. You want to reach out, you know, like this. And so she's doing that via doggy paddle so she can focus on that good reach. And then she immediately goes into swimming. So you can kind of see, look, she's doing doggy paddle with a snorkel. And then boom, she's swimming and she's trying to feel that position 11, that good alignment. And she's not crossing over here at all. And she's not over rotating. And I could show you another video of her swimming where she's rotating, is completely imbalanced, and she's crossing over. But this is a really good stroke. And she swims a lot better immediately after she does doggy paddle. So, to improve her alignment in the water, it's just maybe for a month in the warm up, or the preset, she does 400 yards of this, and then that will address it. But, that's a good drill to do. It's relevant, it's applicable, there's an intent, and she's sandwiching the drill with actual swimming so she can translate it. Randomly doing all these crazy drills like fingertip, not crazy, but like fingertip drag, shark fin, like they're worthwhile if they're addressing a specific form error that you have. As triathletes, we don't swim enough to do unproductive things in the water. And if you're gonna get to the pool, you want to focus on things that actually result in improvements to your stroke. So get a form analysis and then figure out what drills you need to do to actually improve, and then do them deliberately. The doggy paddle is a good one for her. Everybody probably doesn't need to do that one. Things like catch up, I think it's good for everybody to do. Single arm freestyle is good for everybody to do. But other ones, like the esoteric ones, their benefits, they aren't universally beneficial to everybody, and they're a waste of time in a lot of cases. Simply being engaged with your stroke when you're swimming and knowing what your errors are and trying to fix them, that's actually a great thing to do. You don't need to drill yourself into oblivion to improve a form error, as long as you are engaged and hyper-focused in the water and you do everything you can to address them, and you understand where maybe the source of the errors are. So, for example, when we think about crossover, everybody who crosses over, they end up scissor kicking to correct themselves. Because if you're crossing over, you're not swimming straight, your core is you're serpentining in the water, and you have to scissor kick to get yourself back on track. So telling somebody to just, stop scissor kicking, it's not going to work, because they're going to swim in circles. So to stop scissor kicking, what we would tell them to do is, you need to swim, but you need to actually address your crossover first. And then just, the thing you could do is, my favorite drill, swim with the snorkel and pool buoy, and just focus on good alignment. A lot of triathletes benefit from that if they cross over. But again, so the source of the scissor kick isn't necessarily just them doing it for no reason. It's because they're crossing over. So we want to address the crossover when they're swimming, and literally the best way to stop crossing over is to just focus on not crossing over. A lot of times you do have to exaggerate it, but don't underestimate the value of just swimming and being engaged with what you're doing. Recent errors we have seen, we talked about over rotating already, and crossing over, and we talked about all of this. And the final thing is breathing. Breathe. You want to breathe as low as reasonably possible, but even more importantly is you don't want to breathe too late, because that throws off the rhythm of everything. The most powerful position is looking down like this. When your head is turned, especially if your chin is lifted, you're not as stable, and you're rotating on your side. So if you're coming up and entering and you're still like over here, you're not rotating to the opposing side yet, and you're not going to generate that core, that propulsive pull with the coupling the rotational power of your core. I know we're approaching the top of the hour, and we wanted to, so I won't belabor that, but I know we had some questions on the Slack channel that we could address. But does anybody on the call have any questions first and foremost? Because we can always answer the Slack questions in Slack. Nope. Derek, did you want to answer these? No, you mentioned.
Yeah, I'll go through a few of them. Give me 1 second here.
So
on breathing, Conrad, do you think it's something that you would, like, I'm a pretty right heavy breather. Would you predominantly, like, is that something you would stress to work on, or just kind of live with being a one directional breather?
It's good to know how to breathe on both sides, for many reasons in open water, however, an obsession with like, it's less important than I think a lot of swim coaches make it out to be, the bilateral breathing constantly. Almost everybody, when they're swimming in a race, they're breathing to one side every stroke. You need a lot of air. You don't want to withhold breath. CO2 builds up too much. You need oxygen to swim well and to swim fast. And yeah, it is the case that, breathing is going to slow you down a little bit, but if you breathe efficiently, it's really not going to slow you down that much. Beginners, when they breathe, they slow down a lot because they're just not doing it efficiently. When you're breathing, you want your neck and your head in line with your spine at all times, like you're on a skewer, basically. The issue is when people, instead of just turning, they like lift their chin and turn, because that causes the seesaw effect where your upper body angles up and your legs sink. So, the perspective I'm offering is actually not contrarian necessarily. A lot of again, it's good to know how to breathe on both sides in case there's chop coming on one side, or the sun is in your eyes, or you want to key off of somebody else. There's also, you also want to be versatile and agile in the water, and the ability to breathe on both sides enables that. Just like knowing how to do other strokes just gives you a better feel for the water. Breathing to both sides makes you a more versatile swimmer. But if you're doing your main set and you're aiming to build fitness or something, don't worry about it. I would argue, don't worry about it. When you're swimming in a race, don't worry about it. Just get as much oxygen as you can. Pick a side and breathe to it. That's perfectly fine. It's not an issue. Having said that, I still prescribe bilateral breathing in training sessions. It can foster, better stroke symmetry, which arguably could be a good thing if you're really lopsided, so you can swim straighter. And again, it's good to be versatile, but rarely is it essential when you're swimming in open water to breathe to both sides for, tactical purposes, honestly. Would anybody disagree with that? Any of the good pure swimmers out there who grew up with their coaches telling them to bilateral breathe all the time? Again, it's just, if you watch any open water race, everybody's breathing to one side and they're breathing every stroke. It's just the way it is. And even more frequently, we're seeing a 2-3 breath pattern where, for stretches of the race, they're actually breathing twice during one stroke cycle, every other stroke cycle. So it's like, breathe. Does that make sense? So every 3 times their hand hits the water, they're actually breathing twice. We saw this at the guy who led most of the open water swim at the Olympics last year. For much of the race, he was breathing a lot, and it doesn't slow him down. So there has been a little bit of a paradigm shift, I think. That isn't to say that breath control isn't useful or that bilateral breathing isn't useful, because in the instance I just said, the 2-3 breathing pattern, you're breathing to both sides. And in the middle of a race, if I feel that CO2 breathing or like accruing and you're getting that panicky feeling, all it takes is a couple of those 2-3 breaths to get the heart rate back down. He's like, and then you're good to go. So point being, don't sweat too much if you enter an open water race and you can't breathe on both sides super well, but work on it. It's worth working on for sure.
Definitely. Yeah, work on it. Do it. I'd say do it in the warm up. Do it during easy recovery sets. But yeah, like you mentioned, when you're swimming open water, you have to breathe as often as possible. It matters. I think bilateral breathing matters more in pool swimming if you're sprinting, you're trying to breathe less because it is disrupting the stroke and you want to just get to the end of the pool as quickly as possible. All right, but I have these questions pulled up. I'm gonna go through a few of them. Rick asked about going from a 2-beat kick to a 4-beat kick. I think the biggest thing here is we got to think about really just slowing things down. When you are trying to balance out the stroke and connect your stroke to your kick, you know, just slow it down a lot, use fins, that way you're getting that propulsion, but you can also time it while you're doing that.
Yeah, to your point, yeah, the fins I think are helpful. I think that is the main thing, because then you learn the timing that way.
See, flip turns. This I guess I'll briefly talk about this. When anyone's trying to learn how to do a flip turn, I encourage anyone that doesn't know how to do flip turns to start doing them in the pool, because the more you act like a swimmer in the pool, the more you're gonna become a swimmer. You also learn how to streamline too. And one thing I noticed in Derek's video he sent, when he pushes off the wall, he doesn't streamline. But the one thing you can do to practice if you're concerned about getting close to the walls is doing somersaults in the middle of the pool. And basically you just do a somersault, tuck your chin down, and you'd flip over and start swimming the opposite direction. As you get more comfortable, you just get closer to the wall. And then once you get close enough to the wall, you can push off. Some swimmers will push off upside down and they make the rotation, but you want to make sure you're tucking your head under your arms when you're pushing off the streamline. You'll see some people pop out really quick and their head's above the water, and it's just causing more drag. Other swimmers may do like a quarter turn where they hit the wall and they're already half turned already, and that this might be more comfortable for some people too. But I think the turns for certain people are going to be a little bit different based on their experience there.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just you got to do them. You got to hurl yourself at the wall and eventually you figure it out. Yeah, I'd say watch a video on technique and then you just got to do it. The only way to, there are no secrets. You just got to learn how your body rotates, and you just got to commit to drowning for a couple workouts and then you'll be fine. You'll learn it quick. I think that's a main takeaway, but you just got to force yourself to do it.
Yeah. Chris asked about using a watch in the pool, or not using a watch, and you see every triathlete taking a watch in the pool. I think everyone's so data driven that they want to have the metrics and they want it to upload to Strava, and I think it's okay to leave the watch at home. That way you're not screwing around. I think the watch, people tend to even take longer rests too because they're screwing around trying to lap it correctly and things like that. But when it comes to metrics, if you don't have the watch on, you just got to make sure you're letting your coach know what the intervals you're doing, like what the send off was, what the rest was between the intervals. Let's see.
I would say one thing on that front, it's like when you're learning technique, I think you should leave the watch at home. So like this month, I encouraged everybody to leave the watch at home. I'm not somebody who thinks that swimming with a watch in a pool is like sacrilegious or terrible. If you're swimming by yourself, if you're swimming with a master's group, just don't do it. It's stupid. It's going to throw everybody off. But if you're swimming by yourself and you like seeing your time for each lap exactly, or you can't see the pace clock, there's one pool I swim at where there's no pace clock, and yeah, I use my watch for that. But a lot of it is just like it becomes pedantic when everybody's like, oh, you don't use a watch. You're not a real swimmer if you use a watch. But some of the fastest athletes I work with in the water, they use the watch. I know, Todd, you use your watch a lot, and it's good. It's nice to have the data. It's nice to see it. But it's not. It's like people get all bent out of shape about it. It's again though, if it's a distraction, like I know certain athletes, they use the watch and all they care about is like trying to swim an interval at a certain time, and then they're not engaged with their stroke. It's like they're swimming and they're thinking about their watch and what it says, and they're not feeling the water. If you're somebody like that and you end up just fighting the water in the middle of a workout, don't, just leave it at home for sure.
Yeah. When it comes to metrics too, I think Training Peaks doesn't have a ton for swimming. I know it has like cadence, which can be really valuable. I think things you need to know are maybe stroke count, for a 25-yard pool or 25-meter pool if you're in a meter pool. That way, you know your distance per stroke too when you're crossing the length of a pool. So it's good to kind of keep track of that over time as well.
Mm-hmm.
I know Garmin has a couple other metrics though, but it doesn't transfer right over to Training Peaks.
And all right, what's the next one?
Let's see, benchmark times. All right, so I kind of put a list here of, I did this for the 70.3 distance just to kind of keep it simple here. But, at 70.3 Worlds this year in St. George, Ben Canute had one of the fastest swims of the day. I think he went mid-22s, and he was averaging 104 seconds per 100 yards. Lucy, swam on a different day. So she swam 108 per 100 yards. And most top age groupers are probably going to swim. I know Miguel that day swam 108 average. And some of the females, they swam between 25:20 and 27:30. So the thing I'd say is like the top to the middle pack pros, it's getting tighter now, but it's going to be much different than like the top age group athletes in the middle of pack age group athletes, because there's a bigger difference of like abilities across all three disciplines. So you'll see people swim like, a 30-minute, 1.2 mile swim, and they can still break 4 hours. Or you have guys that swim 25 and they might not be at that point either, just based on the run and their bike. But I kind of broke down, what it looks like per 100 for certain times. So a 25-minute, 1.2 mile swim is going to be an average of 111. 26:30 is going to be a 115. 30 minutes flat is a 125. 35 minutes is a 139. And 40 minutes is a 154. So kind of gives you an idea of what the targets are in open water. Obviously, not everyone's going to translate their pool times to open water just based on how good their flip turns are or just their comfort level in open water as well.
Yeah, and in general, if you're swimming open water in a wetsuit and you can draft, your time, your average pace is probably going to be similar to if you were swimming in a pool and you had decent flip turns. So, if you did a 1.2 mile time trial in the pool, you probably could expect to swim that in open water if you had a wetsuit on. If you didn't have a wetsuit on, you'd probably be like 6 to 10 seconds plus per 100 slower in open water than in a pool.
Mm-hmm.
And that has to be zone 3 pace. So we think about your critical swim speed is basically zone 4. Zone 3 is about 5 seconds more or less per 100 slower than that. And that's what these athletes are swimming. So if we assume that they're swimming zone 3, which most of them are averaging probably zone 3, 5 seconds per 100 slower than CSS basically, or T pace. And you can calculate that by doing a 200 and 400 all out and then running a linear regression through it. Or you could do like 1,000-meter time trial. That's going to be pretty close to your T pace if you're a good swimmer. For like newer swimmers, doing 3x300 with like 20 to 30 seconds rest in between and finding the average 100 pace there, that's going to get you the same ballpark within a couple seconds per 100 as CSS.
Definitely. Rick asked another question about how soon before a race is beneficial to increase swim frequency. This is something that, it really depends on the athlete and how much time they have. Like obviously more is going to be better. If you can increase the swim frequency per week by 1, that's going to be quite a bit. I'd say, as you enter that specific phase, leading up to a race the 8 weeks before, getting in an additional swim a week, if you have the time for it, is going to be very valuable. not only just from a fitness standpoint, but also just the feel for the water, which is going to be super important. And how often should you swim in open water? I would argue as often as you can. Especially like obviously in the north, you can't really get in open water until June. But if you live somewhere where the climate's a little bit warmer and you have the ability to get somewhere pretty easily, having that comfort level in the water is going to be pretty valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the answer really depends on the athlete, though. Like somebody who wants to improve their swim dramatically, I mean, they need to be swimming a crap ton all the time.
Yep.
But no, it's a good question if one is just looking to, it's just like everybody hits a plateau, you know, in swimming potentially. And yeah, I would say 2 months is before ramping up the swim load is for those athletes probably is appropriate. That's a massive generalization. And there's nuance in everything, you know, goggle straps. They should be inside, right?
I tuck them in
open water.
Yeah. Minimize the drag. I feel like the cap keeps them in there too, or my goggles better, which probably makes zero difference. Maybe it does or doesn't, but I think it looks cleaner. Yeah, I think it's personal preference, but I've
less likelihood of getting them kicked off too.
Yeah, it's true. Yep.
It's in open water. Races, I definitely put them under. If I'm at the pool, I don't really care. It's what if I put my swim cap on first. I usually do that because I have to adjust the goggles a lot because I have weird eyes. But they should be under the cap, I'd say, in general when you're racing. And then Evan asked about swim zones. I sort of talked about them before. We try to find your critical swim speed. We think about it similar to critical power on the bike or, you know, run threshold pace. That's basically zone 4, you know, 90%. It's on a scale of 0 to 100%. It's like 90%. And then zone 3 is going to be a notch below that. There's a range to all of this, but if zone 3 would call it 5 seconds slower than that. Zone 2 would be 5 seconds slower than that. So if your CSS is 130, so you can hold, say, 130 for 1,000 time trial, or we find your critical swim speed is 130, then zone 3, around 70.3 pace really would be around 135. You know, if you're just warming up and cruising, you know, around 140, you know, we're always give and taking a few seconds. But in general, that's what we're getting at. I mean, it's the same as like, you know, if somebody is like swim steady or, you know, swim, you know, easy, moderate, mad, all out. Like these are just general recommendations. You're not checking heart rate in the pool. Your velocity relative to your effort or power output really hinges on technique. Good swimmers, you know, they have different gears. Poor swimmers, they probably have one speed. So it's like, we can't be as precise with swimming as we are with cycling and running, because you can't look at your watch and say, oh, I'm putting out this many watts. Or even if you were in the water, you knew you were putting out this many watts, that doesn't mean you're swimming efficiently. Like if we could put power meters in our palms, it wouldn't necessarily be the best way to track anyway. If we can display heart rate, maybe that would be beneficial, but we're not. Swimming is so technique focused that it has to hinge off of like RPE effort. And then you're trying to be efficient at that RPE. I think that's the best way to think about it. But the 5-zone model is basically what I said. And, you know, if we have, I don't know if Evan is, he's a coached athlete. Who coaches Evan?
Derek, maybe?
I think Derek Owens might. But our working triathlete manual, it has the intensity zone charts, and it includes swimming. It includes the swimming intensity zones. And also in that working triathlete manual, we have the how to field test. So how to establish your CSS or your zone 4. So if you're a tier 3 athlete, you know, you could use that to test yourself.
One other thing to note too is some pools are just slower than others, and that if you're going to different pools, this is probably not common for many people, but some pools are just not as fast as others. And I go to 2 different pools right now, and there's a noticeable difference between one and the other. I would say close to 5 seconds per 100.
That one we swam in better have been the slow one.
Not the one. No, the other one was slower. But
I'm
but
just
I
kidding.
swim in a faster pool this weekend than that one as well. So
Okay.
yeah, it's and if someone's in a warm pool, or if a pool's warmer, you tend to swim a little bit slower as well. So, I like the model of RPE in the water, like really just trying to find the rhythm. Once you know the effort, because really knowing the effort in a pool is really valuable, because once you get in open water, you have nothing to key off of at all. When you're in a pool, you can look at the clock, you can look at intervals, every time you're at the wall. But when you're in the open water racing, you don't know until you get out of the water. And even then, you still don't know, because the swim could have been long, it could have been short or choppy, and you don't know until you compare against the field after the race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, don't overthink it, and don't read too closely into your time in open water, for sure. That's a good rule. Does anybody have any other questions? If not, feel free to keep asking questions on Slack forever. That's what that Ask a Coach channel is for. Any question you can think of. And if you want to post video of you swimming there, the coaches can respond to it, other athletes can respond to it. So feel free to put yourself out there. Upload. I would recommend uploading a video to YouTube and then just posting the link. That's the easiest way. But feel free to do that, whether you're tier 1 or tier 4, because that analysis will help everybody. Cool. Well, if there are no other questions, we can hold on. Was there somebody messaged something in the chat? Is there anything in the chat? Oh no, what's a question pertaining to the bikes? We could talk about it later. Yeah, and did Katie Ledecky breeze to one side for her distance events? Yeah. So good. But cool. Well, thanks for hopping on, everybody. And next week is cycling month, or next month is cycling month. That's March. So we'll have another webinar focused on cycling, and that will be the focus. So, but yeah, I guess we will reconnect later. But thanks for hopping on.
Bye, everyone.
See ya.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.